A hidden struggle revealed, how a poor farmer's incredible ACT changed her life. Ruth stood in the blistering sun, her calloused hands gripping the shovel like a lifeline. Each thrust into the dry earth felt like a battle cry against the crushing weight of a failed harvest and a credit card bill that loomed larger than the corn silos that dotted her family's farm. At 42, she wasn't just a farmer, she was a warrior, dedicated to preserving a legacy that spanned generations. But this summer was different. The sky seemed twisted, refusing to part with rain, leaving her golden field standing still, lifeless. Every morning, her heart tightened watching the crops wither. The winds whipped across the plains like whispers of defeat, scattering dreams of abundance. While the corporations encroached closer, their shiny tractors and endless resources mocked her small-scale efforts. She felt like an anachronism, out of place in a world eager to swallow up family farms. And each day, debts piled up like the dust on her windowsill, a stark reminder of what hung in the balance, but today was a different day. A knock on her door brought Hank, her kind-hearted neighbor. He hadn't let the rain or shine barrier keep him away, and that familiar face was welcoming amidst her despair. "Need a hand?" he asked, already rolling up his sleeves. Grateful tears threatened to spill over as Ruth nodded, their shared struggle knitting them closer. The moment was simple yet powerful. It was a flash of humanity in a world dimmed by indifference. With every shovel of dirt moved together, Ruth felt the weight shift, not just on the land but in her heart. She opened up about her son Jacob, his distaste for farming and how the city called to him. "He doesn't see it, Hank. He doesn't see what this land gives us." As summer wore on, their bond deepened. They shared stories soaked in laughter and quiet understanding. Yet, on sleepless nights, the distance between Ruth and Jacob gnawed at her like a relentless weed. He'd chosen a path she couldn't comprehend, and every conversation felt like treading on thin ice. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With the county fair approaching, Ruth saw a flicker of hope, a stage to showcase her work and perhaps bridge the chasm with Jacob. The vibrant fair promised a chance to shine, but also came with whispers of cynicism from those who regarded farmers as relics of the past. Determination surged within her, battling against the fears of judgment. On the fair's opening day, excitement buzzed, laughter floated in the air, and adults turned into children again amidst the color and chaos. Standing before the judges made Ruth's heart race. It felt like she was laying her soul bare for all to see. But as she began to tell her family's story through her harvest, disaster struck. The very crops she nurtured splintered and scattered around her. Panic rippled through the crowd, silence draping like a heavy shroud. In that critical moment, with vulnerability laid bare and hope teetering on the edge, something awakened inside her. Ruth took a breath, squared her shoulders, and unveiled not just her remnants of failure, but a heart willing to give, a lesson of selflessness that might just restore what seemed lost. Would it break the wall between her and Jacob, or push them further apart into a realm of misunderstanding? The stakes had never been clearer, yet as she stood before her community, bracing for judgment, a surprising resolve kindled within her. The true spirit of a mother, of a farmer, awaited expression. Would it be enough to win not just the fair but also her son's heart? The answer lingered like a whisper in the wind. Ruth stood frozen, the light from the setting sun casting long shadows across the scattered crops. The weight of the moment hung in the air. It felt as if the whole world held its breath, waiting for her next move. She glanced around, catching the worried expressions from her neighbors, each one a reminder of her struggle, her family's history, and her son's dreams slipping further from her grasp. "Mom," Jacob's voice broke through the silence. He had stepped forward, eyes wide. The sight of him brought relief and a mix of anxiety. She hadn't expected him to come. Hadn't he wanted him to see her stumble? But there he was, standing at the edge of chaos, searching for answers in the debris of her pride. Ruth swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to betray her. This isn't how I pictured it. I just wanted to show everyone what this land can do." The words tumbled out clumsily, burdened with the weight of her hopes. Jacob walked closer, his shoes crunching on what remained of her ambitions. The crowd's murmurs faded away as his gaze turned toward the chaos around them. "It's okay, Mom. It happens." His eyes softened, grappling with the gravity of her moment, his compassion coming through the fissures of tension between them. "But it's not just crops, Jacob. It's everything. It's our legacy. I need you to understand what this land means." She felt a flood of emotion rushing in, urgency driving her voice higher. Was he even listening? The shadows of doubt danced along the edges of her resolve. He hesitated, unsure. "I don't want to be a farmer, Mom. I've told you that." His voice was gentle, but it struck her like lightning. Still, she saw the struggle in his eyes, a silent war between the pull of his own ambitions and the weight of her dreams. "I know," she replied, her voice low now, quieter than she intended. "But I want you to see it. Not just the hard work, but the love, the community, the everything." In that moment, the air shifted. The crowd had drawn closer, their curiosity morphing into a shared moment of understanding. If she could not connect with Jacob through words, perhaps she could show him through the energy pulsing around them. She took a breath and took a small step forward, inviting the nearby farmers and fairgoers closer. "These crops may be a mess," she began, her heart pounding, "but they show the struggle, the very essence of what it means to fight for something you love." A few familiar faces among the crowd nodded in agreement, creating a ripple of empathy that surrounded her. Ruth could feel the knot tightening in her throat loosening just a little. She continued, "Farming isn't perfect. It's messy, just like life. And we can grow from it together." Gripped by the moment, Jacob stepped forward too. He seemed to find his voice in her passion, perhaps daring to dream anew. Maybe we can find a way to make it work, a way that combines both of our worlds." Excited chatter filled the air, hope flickering like fireflies at dusk. Jacob's words sparked something electric in her heart, a cautious glimmer of possibility. "What if we mix tradition with your ideas? The community needs that too." The joy bubbling through the crowd enveloped her, but Ruth still felt the fragility of it all. Would they really be able to unite their visions, or would the distance still linger? What would it take to truly bridge the gap between a mother's heart and a son's dreams? As the fair unfolded around them, colors danced and laughter echoed, the rhythm of hesitant joy pulsed through the atmosphere. But with every moment, the questions stayed. She glanced at Jacob, a beacon of newfound hope shining in the darkest corners of her anxiety. Together, they could redefine what it meant to carry the legacy forward. But would they have the courage to confront the challenges waiting ahead? And was this moment only the beginning of their journey? Jacob's voice hung in the air, heavy with emotion, but the vibrant energy of the fair seemed to rip through the tension like sunlight piercing through dark clouds. Ruth felt the warmth spread from her son's words, igniting a spark deep within her. It was just a flicker, but it was enough to chase away the shadows of fear that threatened to consume her. "Let us not waste any more time," she declared, the fire in her voice rekindled. "Jacob, why don't we gather everyone together? Let us share our ideas. There's so much we can do." The crowd responded with murmurs of enthusiasm, encouraging them on. Ruth forged ahead, her heart racing. She noticed the way Jacob's brow furrowed slightly, a mix of excitement and hesitation flickering across his face. He was unsure, but something in him nudged him forward as well. Ruth called out to a few neighbors she recognized. "Let us hold an impromptu meeting right here. We have ideas to share, traditions to honor, and futures to build." As they gathered, curiosity spread. People moved closer, eyes bright with interest. Farmers from neighboring fields joined, some with dirt still caked on their boots, while others carried the scent of hay on their clothes. This was her community, the lifeblood of her land, and they were here, united in this moment of vulnerability and hope. Jacob stood beside her, a hesitant smile growing on his face as he caught the energy buzzing around them. "Okay, maybe we can work it out together. Let us hear everyone's thoughts," he said, a spark igniting in his eyes. One by one, voices rose from the crowd, and the stories poured out, tales of struggles and triumph, of crops that so nearly failed, yet somehow flourished. Ideas flew like colorful butterflies, each one reflecting individual hearts entwined in a shared dream. A woman spoke of crop diversity, suggesting they introduce sustainable practices. A young farmer proposed a community-supported agriculture initiative to draw neighbors closer. Ruth felt her soul swell with pride as she listened. This was her legacy unfolding right in front of her, shifting into something beautifully complex. Jacob's confidence blossomed too, each nod, each smile infusing him with more courage. They were beginning to see past the fear, embracing the world of possibilities awaiting them, but as Ruth looked around, a flicker of doubt crept in. Would the old ways be enough? What if the new ideas fell flat? The thought sent a shiver down her spine, and she clenched her fists, determined not to let uncertainty hold them back. What if we hosted workshops? She suggested. We could share our knowledge, combine traditional methods with innovative solutions. Jacob's eyes widened, the energy buzzing between them. And we could invite local chefs. Let them teach us how to use fresh produce in new ways. The crowd erupted into excited chatter, the sounds swirling around her like a warm embrace. It felt transformative, each suggestion building upon the last, growing into a vision that danced with possibility. Ruth could see a vibrant community academy forming in the distance, and with each heartbeat, her confidence soared. But still, as they bounced ideas off each other, Ruth noticed a lingering hesitation in Jacob's eyes. She leaned in closer, her voice softening. "Are you all right? You seem lost in thought." Jacob hesitated, his brow furrowing. I worry we might be pushing too far too fast." "What if we fail, Mom?" The question hung heavy, the lightness of the gathering suddenly dimming. Ruth could see the weight of his fears pressing down on him. She reached out, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Failure isn't the end. It's just another chance to rise again. We'll face it together, whatever it may be." Jacob looked at her, a mix of resolve and concern swirling in his gaze. "Okay, but what if we don't have the right support?" The flicker of doubt returned. What if the community would only rally behind her tradition and not the future she envisioned? Would the weight of her dreams crush their shared hopes, just as the air thickened with uncertainty? A familiar voice broke through. "We're with you, Ruth." It was Mr. Collins, a seasoned farmer known for his wisdom. "We've faced hard times before, and we'll face them again. Together, we'll rise." Cheers erupted, revitalizing the energy in the air. Ruth couldn't help but smile, her heart beating faster. They were stronger as a community. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden hue over the fair, surrounding them with warmth. In that moment, everything felt possible. Yet, as hope filled her chest, an unsettling thought lingered in the back of her mind. Would their combined efforts truly translate into success? Could they embrace change without losing themselves in the process? Just then, she caught sight of a figure standing apart, watching them from the edges. A man she hadn't seen in years, his presence a dark cloud looming over the light that was just beginning to shine. What secrets did he hold? And would he threaten the fragile unity beginning to emerge? Ruth's heart raced as she squinted through the softened evening glow, trying to pinpoint the figure lurking in the shadows. Her chest tightened, a mix of anxiety and nostalgia welling up inside her. Memories come flooding back, moments shared, laughter, and the inevitable pain that had followed. She had thought she was finally free of that chapter of her life. "Mom, who is that?" Jacob's voice drew her back to the present. His eyes were wide, reflecting a mixture of confusion and concern. Ruth hesitated. The world around them buzzed with excitement, but her focus was all on the figure standing just beyond the gathered crowd. Someone I thought I'd never see again, she replied, her tone heavy. Does he belong here? Jacob's words were cautious, a protective edge evident in them. She took a deep breath, her stomach roiling with uncertainty. He was part of my past, a time I'd rather forget. But there was no easy way to hold back the truth. This man could stir old feelings and buried conflicts. His name is Mark. We had a complicated relationship. What does that mean? Jacob pressed, stepping a little closer, concern etching his features. I'll explain later, but right now, I need to focus on what is happening here. Ruth forced her gaze back to the circle of friends and neighbors, but not before catching a glimpse of Mark's eyes, a flicker of recognition mixed with something darker. The discussions continued, each farmer presenting a vision for the future, rich with commitment and creativity. Ruth soaked up the energy, but every now and then, she felt Mark's gaze weighing down upon her, heavy with meaning she wasn't ready to unravel. As more ideas flowed, so did her worry. Would this sudden upsurge of hope withstand the storm brewing at the edges? What did Mark want? Just then, a younger farmer, Jesse, stood up. Let's make sure we all contribute. Every voice matters. We could set up a community board to track our plans and progress. The crowd cheered, a powerful wave of unity washing over them. Ruth felt a warmth spread through her. Perhaps this was what they needed, a system of support embedded within the fabric of their community. And yet, in the corner of her eye, that figure remained, silent, ominous. Jacob, she whispered, leaning in closer to him, can you keep an eye on Mark for me? I need you to distract him if he approaches. Jacob nodded, determination on his face. I'll do what I can, Mom. The meeting surged forward, painting bright strokes of possibility over their future. Ruth could sense enthusiasm coiling around them like a vibrant ribbon. They were building something beautiful. But with every laugh shared among her neighbors, there lingered a shadow, a hollowness where confidence drifted into doubt. Finally, as the sun sank low, painting everything in shades of orange and violet, Ruth faced the crowd again. Let us not forget where we've been, but let us also step boldly into where we're going. She called out, her voice ringing with passion. The crowd erupted with applause, and for a moment, she found solace in that shared strength. Yet, before she could bask in the moment any longer, she felt a familiar presence behind her. Turning slowly, she braced herself for what was to come. Ruth, the voice cut through the cheer, nearly silencing it. We need to talk. His words hung ominously, heavy with the potential to change everything they had built in just a few short hours. What would he reveal? And how would it impact her fragile hope? The vibrant dreams they had woven together might soon be tested by a ghost from her past. Ruth's heart beat faster as she turned fully to face Mark. The joy of the meeting faded, replaced by a creeping dread. She swallowed hard, feeling all eyes on her. They were no longer just simple neighbors talking about plans. This was personal, and she wasn't sure she was ready for what was about to unfold. Ruth, he said again, more insistent this time, we really need to talk. It's important. His eyes searched hers, a mixture of urgency and something softer, buried deep. Not here, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Not now, Mark. Ruth felt Jacob's small hand grip her arm. She appreciated his presence. He was her anchor, a reminder of everything she had fought to build. Mark stepped forward, closer, and the smell of freshly turned earth and late summer flowers filled the air around them. Please, he pleaded, lowering his voice. I didn't come here to disrupt things. I came because I need your help. That caught her off guard. Help? From him? Ruth's mind flicked to the reasons they had parted ways. The hurt, the misunderstandings, the shadows of blame had formed a mosaic of pain between them. Help with what? She asked cautiously. I can't explain everything here. We need privacy. His tone turned earnest, sincere. There was something in his expression, a flicker of vulnerability that made her heart ache. The man she once shared dreams with was still in there, somewhere beneath the layers of past wounds. Please, just give me a chance to explain. Ruth glanced at Jacob. His brows were knitted together in concern. She knew he would protect her, but how could she shield him from the weight of this conversation? Yet something about Mark's plea tugged at her curiosity. Fine, she said finally, feeling the weight of the crowd's attention drift as she moved away from the heart of the meeting. Let us talk. As they stepped away from the light of the town's hubbub, the shadows of the trees enveloped them. It felt like stepping into a different world, far from the laughter and hopes of those waiting behind. Why now? She asked, arms crossed defensively. You disappeared for years. I've moved on. Ruth, I know. I made mistakes. I've reflected, and I had to come back. But that's not why I'm here. I need you to hear me out. He took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair, revealing the stress etched on his face. There's something happening back home, at the farm. Something I can't handle alone. What do you mean? Her heart skipped a beat at the thought of his family's farm, an old risk, but one she always worried about from a distance. They're planning to sell the land, Ruth. If that happens, everything we worked for, everything we dreamed of it'll vanish. And I don't know how to stop it. Ruth's breath quickened. Memories of long nights dreaming of their shared aspirations flooded back, weaving a tapestry of hope and pain. You should have spoken up sooner, she said, fighting the urge to feel sympathy. It's your family, you should have had that conversation with them. Do you really think I could? They never listened to me, not since he paused, pain glazing his features. Not since you left. Ruth's heart twisted at the reminder. Anguish she thought was long buried bubbled to the surface. Could she really help him? Ruth, if there's any part of you that still cares, I need you, he implored, his voice barely a whisper amidst the rustling leaves. There's more at stake than just the land. It's about saving our community. For a moment, silence stretched between them, the weight of old feelings and new doubts blending painfully in the air. Could she really step back into his world? Would working together bring about healing, or would it reopen wounds that had barely scabbed over? Ruth looked back toward the gathering, at the faces of her friends and neighbors. They needed her strength. But did she have it within her to confront the past? Just as those thoughts settled in her mind, a commotion erupted back at the crowd. A shout, then gasps echoed through the air. Panic rushed over her as she tore her gaze away from Mark. What is going on? Ruth. Wait, Mark started, but already, she was moving, her instincts taking over. She needed to know what was happening. But as she pushed her way back to the others, one question flickered in her mind: would the past prove to be a blessing or a curse? The crowd was in disarray as Ruth hurried toward the commotion, her heart pounding in her chest. She had been pulled back into a whirlwind of emotions that had nothing to do with Mark and everything to do with her community. As she made her way through the tangled mass of bodies, she could see faces twisted in worry, some pointing towards a low hill just beyond the tree line. Mom! Jacob cried out, his voice laced with fear, anchoring her to the moment. She turned around to see him clutching his small backpack, eyes wide and searching. I'm right here, Jacob. Stay close, she reassured him, but her own anxiety surged. What could have caused such a panic? Just as she broke free from the crowd and reached the crest of the hill, the scene unfolded in front of her like a nightmare laid bare. A small barn, standing stoic against the backdrop of amber fields, had erupted into flames. The inferno danced and flickered, sending embers spiraling into the twilight sky. Where's the owner? Someone shouted. Ruth's heart sank. The barn belonged to an elderly neighbor, Mrs. Hargrove, a kind woman who had cared for many in their community. She felt a rush of dread at the thought of anyone being trapped inside. Mrs. Hargrove. Ruth called out, frantically scanning the area. The heat radiated against her skin, a cruel reminder of the rising chaos. A few neighbors rushed forward, faces grim, searching for a way to help. Someone call the fire department. Another voice yelled. In the midst of the chaos, she felt a familiar presence next to her. Mark appeared, determination etched across his features. We need to help them. The fire might spread to the fields, he said urgently, but Ruth felt stuck, paralyzed by horror. Jacob, stay here. She instructed, her voice fierce and protective. But as she turned back to the flames, she saw Jacob edging closer, drawn to the flames like a moth to a light. Mom, please. He pleaded, his little body trembling. We can't just let it burn. The sight of her son's fear ignited something deep within her. She looked back at Mark, whose eyes reflected the same anguish. What if we could save it? She asked, knowing the answer already hung thick in the air. I'll grab a bucket and help. Mark shouted, racing toward the well behind the barn. The spirit of urgency shifted around her, charging the air like an electric storm. Jacob, we need to move, she said, swallowing her own fear. We can help too. With that, she took his small hand and together they dashed toward the barn. The townspeople were gathering water, forming a chain to douse the flames. Ruth could feel the heat close, breathing and stinging her skin, but she pushed forward, letting instinct lead her. As they reached the line, pulling heavy buckets of water, adrenaline coursed through her veins. It was then she noticed Mrs. Hargrove standing just a little ways away from the chaos, her expression vacant and filled with despair. Ma, come on. Ruth called out, gesturing for her to step back. You need to be safe. This is too dangerous. But Mrs. Hargrove hesitated, torn between grief and confusion over the loss of her beloved barn. As flames licked at the wood, one thought struck Ruth like lightning: time was running out. Please. We're here. You're not alone, Ruth said, weaving through the frenzy to reach her. Suddenly, a crash echoed, startling the group and sending a fresh surge of flames into the air. Ruth's heart raced, a new panic setting in as her focus turned back to the fire. She could feel Mark right behind her, urgency flashing in his eyes. Ruth! He called, but before she could answer, a desperate scream pierced the air. Help! I can't breathe. It was Mrs. Hargrove, her voice splintered with fear. Ruth whipped around to see her stumbling toward them, disoriented and coughing. The weight of the burning barn pressed down on them all, but Ruth felt a surge of hope. Jacob, keep your eyes on her. Mark, come help me. She rushed forward, feeling the heat of the flames as she grabbed hold of Mrs. Hargrove. Together, they worked to pull her back, but the flames surged. Dangerously close. It felt like time had slowed, every second counted, the distance to safety shrinking, and fear clawing at her insides. Could she really save her? Just as they reached the line of safety, another loud rumble erupted. Part of the barn's structure collapsed under the relentless blaze. The explosion knocked them back, a wave of heat crashing over them. Ruth gasped, adrenaline flooding her senses, as she clutched Jacob close, who was wide-eyed with terror. The moment hung heavy, but all she could think was how this was more than just a fire. The embers of change were igniting, and in that fire, she sensed a rekindling of purpose. As she and Mark half-carried Mrs. Hargrove to safety, a thought struck her: protecting their land, their community, and each other was no longer just a dream. It was a necessity. But as the flames roared behind them, one vital question loomed in her mind: in the aftermath of this disaster, would they each find a way to rekindle the past and forge a future? Ruth's heart pounded in her chest as they staggered away from the inferno. The heat of the flames still lingered against her back, a constant reminder of the chaos they had escaped. She caught sight of Mrs. Hargrove's frail form, slumped against a nearby tree, and her stomach tightened. The lady had given so much to this community. How could they let this happen to her? Ruth! We have to get her out of here. Mark was urging, still trying to gather water with the others. The urgency in his voice brought Ruth back to the present. Jacob remained by her side, eyeing the terrifying blaze that crackled and crackled against the darkening sky. Jacob, she said softly, kneeling down to his level, "we're going to be okay. Just hang tight." "Mom, what if the barn is all she has left?" Jacob's voice was small, almost lost in the growing noise of the crowd. Ruth couldn't answer him right away. She felt that not again the ache of knowing how one event could ripple out and change lives. This was more than just a structure, it was a home, memories wrapped up in timber and nails. The crowd buzzed with frantic conversation, fingers pointing at the fire, at each other, desperate for answers. Someone had managed to get hold of a hose, others clutched buckets, glaring defiantly at the flames, each face a mask of determination and fear. It was the community's essence, visible in this moment of crisis. Suddenly, Mrs. Hargrove coughed again, breaking Ruth from her thoughts. She rushed to her side, kneeling before the elderly woman. "Mrs. Hargrove, breathe with me," she said, trying to catch the woman's gaze, cupping her hands over her trembling fingers. In and out, in and out. The rhythmic pattern formed a lifeline between them, but even as Ruth worked to keep her focused, she could feel the mounting tension behind her. Fear was not just in the air, it was coiled like a snake, ready to strike. The flames leaped higher, angry and wild. Behind her, Mark called out again, "We need to keep that fire contained. The fields are next." His tone cut through the air like a whistle. Ruth jerked her head back, her heart torn between the fragile woman in front of her and the chaos threatening to swallow them all. "I'll help," she shouted, forcing herself upright. She took a long, steadying breath and turned to the makeshift team forming near the well. They took notice, many faces grim but aflame with determination, ready to fight for their community. Together, they filled buckets, passing them up the line like a lifeline. The water splashed on the side of the barn, hissing angrily on impact. Ruth felt the sting of steam rise, the cool water providing a momentary relief from the oppressive heat, but as she turned back to check on Mrs. Hargrove, she noticed the old woman's eyes were glazed. "Stay with me, Mrs. Hargrove," Ruth pleaded, pressing a hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now. We're going to protect what matters." But was that true? Could they really protect anything in this raging storm? The fire roared behind them as they fought, its light casting eerie shadows. Ruth's stomach twisted with fear but also courage. This was a moment where everything could change. As they worked, a creeping realization began to take root in her heart. What if this wasn't just about saving a barn or a field? What if it could be about saving each other? About rekindling the bonds that had faded over time under the weight of daily life? Then Mark met her gaze, his eyes shining with fiery determination. "Ruth!" he called out, a spark of hope igniting between them amid the fire's roar. "Whatever happens, we do this together." In that moment, Ruth felt a swell of possibility. But just as hope flickered, the roof of the barn rumbled and then, with a deafening crack, collapsed. Debris spewed forth like thunder, and the crowd gasped collectively. A tidal wave of fear washed over them. Ruth's heart plummeted. The battle was far from over, and the fight for their future had just begun. Would they find a way through the ashes? And did she have the strength to forge a new path, with fire tightening its grip? On her town, the one thing Ruth now knew was, it wouldn't just be the barn that would rise from the ashes. It would be them. But as she prepared to fight with every last ounce of her strength, a question lingered: could they truly rebuild together? What new strength would emerge from this fire? The air was thick with smoke and desperation as Ruth shifted her focus from the fallen structure. It was gone, but what truly mattered still stood: the people who relied on each other for strength. The community was alive with movement, each person fighting their own battles against the flames and the fear that gripped their hearts. "Jacob! Stay close!" Ruth called to her son, who was peering wide-eyed at the chaos. He nodded, but the fear in his gaze sent a shiver through her. He was still so young. "Get the others moving!" Mark shouted, rallying the crowd. "We need to create a barrier line to protect the rest of the farm." Ruth rushed over, her heart racing as she joined Mark. They scooped water together, buckets forming a chain between the well and the fire. Each splash against the flames created a symphony of hisses, mixing with the chaos around them. As she worked, Ruth's mind swirled. The motions were automatic, but the weight of the moment pressed hard against her chest. Every splash was for Mrs. Hargrove's memories. Every bucket transported not just water, but hope itself. If they lost the barn, would hope go with it? Ruth glanced back at Mrs. Hargrove. The old woman was still slumped against the tree, her breath steady but shallow, a flicker of light amidst the darkness enveloping them. Determination settled in Ruth's bones. They were fighting for more than just wood and nails, they were fighting for legacy, for memory, for the collective heart of their community. Suddenly, a sharp cry pierced the air. A child's voice, full of panic. "My dad! He's in the barn." A little girl stood at the edge of the crowd, tears streaming down her cheeks as she pointed toward the thickening smoke. Ruth felt ice in her veins. "Mark! We have to help her." He turned, understanding flooding his expression. "We can't. But we have to. He could be trapped." Ruth's mind raced, torn between the fire and the cries of desperation. In that moment, she realized something essential: they were no longer just individuals struggling on their own, they were a single unit, hearts intertwined through shared love and grief for their home. "Everyone listen!" Ruth shouted, her voice unwavering. "We can't save the barn alone. But together, we can find him. Everyone who can help, let us go." The crowd hesitated, fear holding them back. But then Mark stepped forward, fired up with the same passion Ruth felt. "She's right. If we work together, we can get him out." One by one, people began to move. Ruth felt the rush as they formed a semicircle, hands gripping tight as they created an unbreakable bond of unity. Hope breathed life back into their weary bodies. With a renewed purpose, they rushed toward the barn, the fire roaring in response. The heat was unbearable, but Ruth pushed forward, heart pounding with determination. She squeezed Jacob's hand, guiding him close. "Stay behind me." As they neared the entrance, the smoke thickened, intoxicating and blinding. Ruth could barely see, and each breath felt like inhaling shards of glass. But she pressed on. "Dad!" The girl's voice echoed from within, desperation mingling with flames. Ruth's heart ached for her, then suddenly, a deep voice called back, "I'm here. I'll be right out." Just as hope surged, the ground quaked beneath them, the structure groaning ominously. "Get back!" Mark shouted, fear rejuvenated. A torrent of flames surged from the entrance, enveloping them in a wave of heat. Ruth shielded Jacob, pushing him behind a heavy barrel just in time as embers flew like angry hornets. "Mom, what do we do?" Jacob's voice was trembling, filled with the innocence of his age. "We hold on. We fight for our family." Ruth shouted, rallying her strength. As the crowd regrouped, she felt the burn of tears in her eyes, not from fear but from anger. This wasn't just their fight, it was a testament to what they could endure together. But did they have enough time? Ruth gritted her teeth, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Without giving it another thought, she shouted, "We need to form a line right here. Pass the buckets. We can do this." Every drop mattered now. The fire raged, and walls crumbled. But amid the chaos, Ruth felt a shift inside her, a spark of resilience igniting from the ashes all around. Together, they would face the flames. Together, they would find the strength to carry on, and as the community united against the blaze, Ruth's heart whispered a truth that had always been there, hidden beneath her fears. True strength came from standing tall, even when the ground felt uncertain beneath them. What would they find as the smoke cleared? Would they be transformed by the firefight, emerging not just as survivors, but as something greater? Ruth's heart raced as she felt the heat from the flames licking closer, a fierce reminder of how quickly things could turn. The barn, once the centerpiece of their small, hard-won life, was now a raging inferno just steps away. Each bucket they passed relayed not just water, but determinism, every splash echoing her resolve. "See Mon, keep it moving." Mark's voice cut through the air, a beacon of strength amidst chaos, urging the crowd forward. With each handoff, with each desperate gulp of air taken away from the black smoke, Ruth felt the energy around her shift. More people joined their line, fear melting away in the face of fierce resolve. "Mom, I can help." Jacob's small voice quivered but his spirit shined bright. "Okay, buddy. Just stay behind me and be careful." Ruth smiled down at him, trying to reassure not only him but herself. She needed him, more than he knew, as he was a symbol of everything she was fighting for. As they made their way closer to the barn, panic loomed larger than the flames. Ruth's eyes darted around, searching for any signs of life amidst the towering flames. The little girl's father, he was still in there. Could they be too late? Ruth and others began to shout his name, their voices mixing with the crackling fire, the cacophony rising and falling like a desperate prayer chanting amidst a storm. Then, just as she felt the despair wrapping around her heavier than the smoke, a figure emerged from the swirling haze. It was him. "Help me. Please." His voice was strained, filled with urgency as he stumbled towards them, ash streaking across his face. The crowd cried out with relief, but Ruth's heart dropped at the sight of the raging flames that chased him. "Get water on him!" Ruth shouted, not even realizing how the command pierced through the fear gripping her heart. A dozen hands shot into action, passing buckets like lifelines. The man staggered closer, his breath ragged, skin charred, but he was alive. As buckets splashed over him, Ruth felt a surge of hope bubble up inside. They were doing this together. In this unspeakable moment, they were a community fighting against oblivion, but the barn groaned again, protesting as beams twisted and cracked. It wouldn't hold much longer. "Get back." Mark's warning rang out as the ground shook beneath them. Ruth instinctively pulled Jacob closer, wrapping her arms protectively around him, their breaths mingling in fear and determination. "Mom! We can't leave him!" Jacob cried, his eyes wide, pleading. Her heart clenched. Her son, just a child, was witnessing something no kid should ever have to see. "No, we won't. We are not leaving anyone behind. Everyone, stay strong." One more push. Another rush of adrenaline surged through the crowd as they kept forming link after link, pushing against their own desperation. Spirit grew like the flames, vibrant and powerful. In those moments, they were something more than individuals fighting a fire, they were a movement, an unyielding will manifesting in action. Ruth felt tears streak silently down her cheeks, mixing with the heat of moment. Fire danced in her eyes, but they held the light of tenacious hope. Then the unthinkable happened. A wall buckled under the heat and collapsed with a deafening roar, sending debris crashing down. "Retreat!" Mark shouted, thrusting his arm toward safety as panic spread through the group. The blaze raged hungrily, as if it were alive, and the crowd surged backward, chaos spilling over. Ruth looked for Jacob, and a cold wave of terror washed over her when she couldn't see him. "Jacob!" She screamed, her voice slicing through the air thick with smoke. "Mom! I'm here." His little voice called from behind the barrel, the only protection he had found. Relief flooded her, but hesitation gripped her heart. It was a desperate moment, and she couldn't lose him. "Stay put. Don't move." Time seemed to warp as Ruth dashed back towards him, blinded by smoke and fear, but she could feel every second stretching painfully. She flung herself around the barrel, her arms reaching for him, gripping his trembling body tightly. "Hold on to me." They stood together, the world around them roaring. The crowd was scattering, but the fire was forcing them closer together. Suddenly, she wasn't just fighting for the barn, but for every life interwoven in her own. Just then, a loud crash echoed throughout the scene, signaling a rapidly approaching danger. "Ruth! We need to get out." Mark called, urgency lacing his voice. With the barn in peril, would they evacuate in time? Or would they be trapped inside the fiery chaos they were desperately trying to quell? Would their commitment to each other be enough to withstand the storm? Ruth tightened her grip on Jacob, feeling the weight of countless lives resting on their small, united front as she stood amid the very heart of despair. But amid the chaos, amidst the blazing embers and swirling smoke, a moment of clarity hit Ruth. She felt the pulse of her community as they fought, shoulder to shoulder, hearts beating as one under the light of the fire. The tension had drawn them closer, and now together they faced not just a burning barn but a fiercer enemy: despair. "Mark!" Ruth yelled, her voice cutting through the pandemonium like a knife. "Gather the others. We need to set our sights on creating a safety path to lead everyone out. I know Mrs. Hargrove's barn is in flames, but our lives matter more." Mark nodded, and urgency transformed his face. "Together we can do it. On my count." Ruth felt adrenaline surge. The people around her, friends and neighbors, connected through shared fears and dreams, their eyes brightened by the same hope that ignited within her. Together, they would fight not just for survival, but for a renewed purpose that transcended what they'd lost. "All right, everyone. On 3. Mark shouted. 1, 2, 3. They surged forward, hands clasped tightly as they danced through the haze, forming a human chain that pulsed with unity. Ruth felt Jacob clutching her hand, a fierce resolve battling against the fear she saw in his eyes. "I'm right here, buddy. We're moving together." She clenched his hand tightly, anchoring them both in the chaos. As they pushed toward safety, the inferno roared, but they refused to let it consume them. Water splashed and laughter erupted amid shouts of encouragement. Together they forged a path through the chaos, a luminous thread weaving through the darkness. With every step, Ruth tackled her fears head-on. Memories of her past with Mark echoed, the dreams they shared, promises broken, but now it was different. This was more than a rekindled relationship, this was a chance to unite their futures. As their hands joined, tucked tightly in their community's embrace, she believed they could transcend the struggles of their pasts. A chorus of voices rose above the roar of the flames, chanting reminders of their strength, who they were, what they cherished. For Mrs. Hargrove. For our families. For our future. And with those words igniting the air, a crack split the sky. The barn groaned one last time, a low bellow that filled Ruth with dread, but they pressed on, hearts united. They huddled together as they rumbled out of the gathering storm, a tide of humanity flowing towards safety. Then, just as they breached the threshold, a falling beam sent shockwaves through their circle, plummeting to where they had just been. The fire exploded into a grand finale, licking the sky with ferocity. Ruth's heart raced as she turned back to see the barn collapse behind them, a kaleidoscope of golden embers swirling as they danced into the night. Breathless, they staggered from the wreckage, tears of relief mingling with sweat on Ruth's brow. She looked at her neighbors, their expressions a mix of wonder and disbelief, and saw joy replacing fear. "We did it!" Jacob exclaimed, his once terrified eyes now sparkling with excitement. Ruth wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close, a fierce smile breaking across her face. "Yes, we did. Every moment of struggle had led to this, the beauty of their connection shimmering brighter than any flames." Turning toward the crowd, Ruth felt their spirit surge within her. "This is just the beginning. This land, this community, together we can rise. We understand the weight of loss, but for every life lost, there is hope gained in our unity." Amidst the smoky aftermath and harmonized cheers, Mark stepped forward, catching her gaze. "I'm here, Ruth. Let us rebuild not just what we lost, but something even more beautiful." Something blossomed between them, a promise of renewal rooted in struggle and resilience. With the embers still glowing behind them and a new dawn on the horizon, they could feel the laughter breaking through the silence, radiant and warm as they emerged together. From that day forward, they faced challenges not alone but as one. Each day became a testament to transformation, every struggle a chance to grow. Ruth realized something essential about legacy. It wasn't just about land or farms, it was about love and community. And as she looked into Jacob's eyes, she saw a future filled with endless possibilities. "We'll make a home, together," she whispered, and Jacob beamed brightly. This was their fight, their story. The beginning of countless new fires of hope, of dreams, and of a better tomorrow. Now is the time for action. You need to subscribe immediately to this channel to not miss the next exclusive stories that change lives. You must leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help other hearts find this journey. Don't wait not even one more second. Comment below with your reactions and feelings about this emotional ending. And share instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Let us make a difference together.